nothing that gives me more pleasure than being able to introduce Sylvia Whitlock. There are surely some of you who don't know the details of her story and extraordinary and incredible leadership that she offers not only to Rotary, but to people in her community, and certainly in years of being a high school principal, she's influenced many, many lives in her journey through life. Sylvia is best known as the first female Rotary Club president in the world. And she belonged to a club, the Rotary Club of Duarte in California, who back in 1977, so 10 years before the case went to the Supreme Court to admit women into Rotary, in 1977, her club was admitting women. They had a very progressive superintendent, and they were admitting women, but when they put their names forward to Rotary, they put their last name and their first initials so that they didn't know that it was a woman. And Rotary came to find out what happened, and they actually came and pulled their charter. They decided, well, the heck with that. They became the ex-Rotary Club of Duarte, and they continued doing business and good work and great service. And so as 1987 rolled around, Sylvia was in line to be the president of the Rotary Club of the ex-Rotary Club of Duarte. And so when the decision came down from the Supreme Court, she was in line to be president, and therefore women were admitted into joining our great organization, and she took the helm as the very first female president. She brings so much to this dialogue and to this conversation that I'm going to turn it over very quickly to her, because I want you to hear the story from her. I want her to be able to tell you everything. But let me just say, I mentioned earlier that she's my hero, and I truly mean that.
This all started at a time when Rotary International was female distancing membership, didn't have any females in membership. Okay, so, you know, we're talking about tomorrow. Tomorrow, it used to be for me when polio is eradicated from the world. Now, it's also when COVID-19 is eradicated from the world, and that's going to happen. That's going to happen. But it's been 33 years now since women were accepted into Rotary, since the Supreme Court decision. Women are making their mark in Rotary. We're waiting for the time when there will be a woman at the helm of Rotary, because we know that will happen. We know that will happen. But as Jennifer mentioned, Superintendent Richard Key was the person with the huge idea that he could invite women to join Rotary. I mean, after all, he was a school superintendent, and there were a lot of heavyweight, I shouldn't use that descriptor, a lot of women in executive positions, in CEO type positions in the district. And, you know, and he was a little club and they wanted members. Well, the whole idea of Rotary is service. People who can do the business of Rotary, people who can serve their communities, people can do all the things that this world needs. And women can do that too. And Dick said, you know, we have women who can do that. And of course, at the time, women executive types were the types that were invited into Rotary, even for men. But Dick thought, we have a psychologist, we have some principals, we have a journalist, they can be good Rotarians. And so he checked it out with the district governor. And the district governor is the one that violated the four-way test, because he was the one who said, yeah, I think you can do that. But, you know, when you register them, as Jennifer mentioned, don't use their first names, just use initials. So, you know, it's S. Whitlock, you know, M. Elliott, and so on. So no one will know. Well, and no one seemed to know. But then we had, you know, when I was invited to join Rotary, and I remember asking Dick when I became a principal in the district, how can we really connect with the community here? Because if you don't connect with community and with the parents of the district, it's difficult to serve their children. And I remember him saying, oh, don't worry about it. We're going to invite you to Rotary, and that'll be it. And I said, Rotary, what's Rotary? You know, It's a question everybody asks when they hear about Rotary for the first time. It's the best kept secret there is anywhere. Uh, I didn't know anything about Rotary, and I like to tell people that I knew about Kiwanis. All of you know about Kiwanis? You know what Kiwanis means? It means waiting to get into Rotary. That's yeah. And you know what? I didn't make that up. A Kiwanian person actually told me that. And you know, the Kiwanians do the same kind of humanitarian service. In fact, now, especially with these connections, we're working more closely with Kiwanis and other service clubs than we ever did. But I knew about Kiwanis, I knew about lions because I'm a school person, and lions provide eyeglasses, and I knew about elks because, you know, you see them walking the streets in New York. I lived in New York for a while, and you'd see them in those interesting hats, and you'd say, who are those people? And somebody said, they're elks, and you say, okay. But I had literally never heard about Rotary. But I knew when he invited me that they were locked in a struggle with international. And I'll tell you a little bit about the legal wrangling and some of the more interesting experiences, because now I look back on them, and some of them are funny, some of them are interesting. It's all poignant. So Duarte is a little town in the foothills of the San Gabriel Mountains, maybe about 20 miles east of Pasadena, and most of you know where Pasadena is. The Rose Parade comes from Pasadena. Duarte, the two largest businesses in Duarte at the time were the school district, the Duarte Unified School District, and the City of Hope Hospital. Maybe many of you know City of Hope is one of the highly rated cancer hospitals, and they're also in Duarte. And of course, the club was struggling to raise membership. The superintendent of schools had the idea. He checked it out with the governor. The governor said, hey, I think that's a good idea. And nobody ever mentioned that Rotary said there were no women. And he said, remember, when you register them, just use their first initials. Well, Dick did that. He sent in the registrations for the women, and he used their first initials. And the women did what Rotarians do. They entered really wholeheartedly into the service of Rotary. I mean, you know, we had the yard sales, we made snow cones for the city picnic, we had breakfast with Santa Claus, the breakfast with the Easter Bunny for the kids, we made Thanksgiving baskets for the needy families, and we made dinners for cancer survivors. We did all the things that women do. But the other big event that was happening was that they were planning their 25th anniversary of the Duarte Club. Remember, 25 years and there had been no women there in that club. So the celebration was set. Everything was set. And Rotary, as it does for all clubs who were observing something special, they sent a representative to Duarte to join in the celebration of the 25th anniversary. This was an important club milestone. And of course, when the representatives came, the women were introduced as Rotarians. And the representatives thought, women Rotarians? The buzz was just really obvious. Women Rotarians? We don't have women in Rotary. And somebody said, oh, this club does. Well, they stayed until the party was over. They enjoyed the party. They had a good time, men and women alike. And then they went back to Rotary International, and they didn't lose any time in communicating all the events that had occurred in Duarte. And immediately they sent us a memorandum that said, women are not allowed in Rotary. The women need to be asked to leave Rotary. And if the women do not leave Rotary, you may not call yourself a Rotary Club. That was it. Boom, 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 just like that. So the club, Bill Brooks, I remember, was a member at the time, and Bill Brooks said, let's see how many people want the women to leave. So they took a vote, and they decided they would not ask the women to leave. Instead, they asked to appeal to the board of directors. But they were told, correctly so, that they could not appeal to the board of directors unless they were a real Rotary Club. And if there were women in there, there wasn't a real Rotary Club. Well, Okay, they thought, well, we'll appeal to the council legislation. And that year, that council was meeting in Tokyo. So one member was chosen to take the issue to Tokyo. But it was an interesting situation, however, because when the issue was presented, it was not should women be members of Rotary, but the question was, did the Rotary Club of Duarte violate Rotary bylaws by inviting women into membership? And of course they had. So the vote against turned out to be against having women retain as women was 1,000 to 34. Imagine there were actually 34 people there who thought there should be women in Rotary. They didn't like the female distancing. Well, I met one of those gentlemen when the Rotary District International Convention was in Calgary. I was on a train riding into the convention center, and across from me was this wonderful Rotary couple wearing all their badges just as I was. So the gentleman looked at me and he said, are you a member of the Rotary Club of Duarte? Isn't that the club that invited women to join Rotary? You know, and I have this big smile on my face because, yes, we did. And here we are. And he said, you know, I was at the Council of Legislation in Tokyo, and I voted to have women in Rotary because I thought they should always be there. And his wife, his sweet wife, sitting right next to him, said, well, I didn't think so then, and I don't think so now. And I was stunned. I couldn't understand why. And she said, and it's interesting to note that many women had opposition to women being members of Rotary. And she explained it. She said, you know what? Our women are going to Rotary meetings at night, our men are going to Rotary meetings at night, and when they're meeting with women, we don't know what's going on. So maybe they didn't consider men as trustworthy as they might be. But however, you need to know that that's not the first time the Council on Legislation had heard the issue of women in Rotary. Some years before, when it met in Detroit, India, India of all places, had brought up the issue, and the council just kind of poo-pooed it, and they went away. Even more interesting, the first Rotary Constitution didn't specify that Rotarians had to be men. It just said persons of good character, persons of good character. But you know, that was a time when there were not many women in the workaday world. And because men were the ones engaging in fellowship and business activities, after a while, the bylaws just morphed into men of good character. So that when we were invited to join, the bylaws did say men of good character. If I would ask Paul Harris a question today, and it's interesting because when I visited in Evanston, there was this life-size uh, rendering of Paul Harris in his room. I would have said, would you have intentionally excluded women from Rotary? I asked him that question when I was there, and he didn't say a word, not a single word. But Jack Davis, who was the president of Rotary International at the time, said, Rotary, the unity of Rotary International was jeopardized by the unilateral move of the Duarte Club. It wasn't. It was enhanced. The unity of Rotary was enhanced by the move of the Duarte Club. So Rotary sent someone to our meeting. They came to the coffee shop on Huntington Drive, and they asked to have their charter. And we had to give up the charter. And so Bill Brooks said, you know what? We'll give up the charter. We'll just rename ourselves. We'll call ourselves the ex-Rotary Club of Duarte. Big X over the Rotary icon. We'll call ourselves the ex-Rotary Club of Duarte. And you know, we were the ex-Rotary Club of Duarte for almost 11 years. 11 years. Because we had to take the issue to court. An attorney in a neighboring club in the Arcadia Club thought, we can take this to court. We'll just give notice to Rotary that we're going to sue to get women admitted into membership. And they did. And Rotary fought for a long time to have the case heard in federal court instead of California courts, because it said not all members of the board of directors are Californians. So we need to hear this in federal court. But the reason was because the federal court had ruled on an issue that was, favorable to a New York club that had had an issue seeking really exclusionary rules for private club members. So, but the federal court ruled that the case should be heard in California court. And so it went to the California Superior Court. And it wasn't long before the Superior Court, upheld Rotary's right to expel the club. Now, it's really interesting to look at what happened at this time, because no one in Rotary, no one in our Rotary Club expected this to happen. We're talking about women becoming members and serving Rotary. The issue was, and it's interesting to me that this was not an issue that we noted. This was a civil rights issue, but we never recognized it as such. For us, it was a membership issue. For the rest of the world, it was a civil rights issue. So the Superior Court upheld Rotary's right to expel the club, and we all sat up because we thought, oh, this isn't going to be the slam dunk we thought it was going to be. And so Sanford had some work to do, and we decided we would appeal to the appellate court in California. And so he did, using as part of his case the fact that the Unruh Act in California, many of you are probably familiar with the Unruh Act, and you have something similar in other places, banned discrimination in public accommodations. We were helped in that appeal by the ACLU, by the Seattle Five that was also struggling to get women in Rotary, and they actually filed an amicus brief to support our case. And Rotary was considered a public accommodation because of its classification system, and because at that time, probably 80% of their members had their membership dues paid by their employers. And so under the Unruh Act, the California Appellate Court ruled that the club should not be expelled. And so essentially what happened is the Superior Court ruling was reversed. But Rotary said, we're in this case for the get-go, and they immediately appealed to the California Supreme Court. Well, the California Supreme Court refused to hear the case, essentially affirming the decision of the appellate court. But the decision was incumbent on all California clubs, but only California. Remember, this was a California decision. It's interesting to me now when I think about it that when this was all going down, if you were a Rotarian in a decision-making capacity, if you were on the board of directors, if you were deciding the direction your club was going to take, if you had a daughter who was 10 years old, by the time this was settled, she would have been 21 years old. And what kind of world were you creating for her? Did you have behind her? What kind of support were you giving her as a young woman as she moved into her career and other activities in the world? A whole generation. Well, here we are. The California Appellate Court says we can have women in Rotary. And of course, that was the year that I was coming in as president. So the usual thing, incoming presidents get invited to pets, okay? But before women, took a long time for things to change in Rotary. And so I got the invitation to pets, and I was reminded to take my coat and tie because they were taking directory pictures. So I took my coat and tie, and I probably had a picture in my coat and tie for that directory. But I went to pets. There were 209 men in that pets, because we were combined pets, and one woman. There was not even a woman guest in pets. Of course, there wasn't anything bad about that situation, because when it came time for restroom breaks, there were long lines outside the men's restroom, and nobody going in the women's restroom. But the men were cordial, they were polite, they were interested, most of them, in what was happening in Rotary at the time. And as they talked in the session about Rotary International, our district governor said, you know, Rotary is going to appeal to the United States Supreme Court. And I couldn't believe I was hearing that. I couldn't believe I was hearing that. Why would you appeal the case of women in a service club to the US Supreme Court? And I thought about what my education had taught me about the US Supreme Court and the kinds of cases that they listen to. Roe versus Wade, huge case. You know, Board of Education in Topeka, Kansas, the discrimination case, huge case. How does women in a service club compare with any of this? Well, see, I wasn't thinking. But I realized, I realized in short order that this was a civil rights case. And it was on those terms, that the United States Supreme Court took the case. Our district governor said, you know, this is just a little club making a lot of noise, just the case of the mouse that roared. And so we went back. I wish I had a banner to show you. We had a new banner with a little mouse on the bottom of it, and we called ourselves ex-Rotary Club of Duarte, the mouse that roared. And we were the mouse that roared for 11 years. In fact, we even have a mouse pin now. Maybe, I think I gave Jennifer a mouse pin. Tiffany, did you get a mouse pin? I have given away all my mouse pins. I think I have one left. But the Supreme Court, the United States Supreme Court, did take the case. One of the attorneys at Rotary said, you know, and it was a membership, it was not a membership thing. He said, they're forcing us to take everybody in, just like a motel. But their argument was that the ruling violated their First Amendment right of association. But on May the 4th, 1987, after taking the case, and we didn't think they would, on May the 4th, 1987, the court found that considering the size, purpose, selectivity, and exclusivity of Rotary's membership, the relationship among the club's members was not of the intimate or private variety that warranted First Amendment protection. Those were the words of the U.S. Supreme Court. So Sandra Day O'Connor didn't vote because her husband was a Rotarian, and that was an issue, okay? But writing for the unanimous court, Justice Powell argued, and I want to read it. He said, many of Rotary's activities, including their meetings, are conducted in the presence of strangers. And because women members would not prevent the club from carrying out its purposes, there was no violation of associational rights. And the little postscript said, furthermore, even if there were a slight encroachment on the rights of Rotarians to associate, that minimal infringement would be justified since it serves the state's compelling interest in ending sexual discrimination. Those were the words in the Supreme Court decision. And there it was. And now this decision was incumbent on all USA clubs, So I was driving to school in the morning. It's probably about 7:30 in the morning when the news came over the airways. And of course, the news came over the airways in New York. And they're 3 hours ahead of where we are in California. You know, that's where you are now. So by the time I arrived at school, I listened to it on the radio, and I couldn't believe what I was hearing. But by the time I arrived at school, maybe some 20 minutes later, I think all the media in the world were on my doorstep. So Mary Lou, who was the very first woman who walked into a Rotary Club meeting, Mary Lou and I were invited by the superintendent to come up to the district office because Warren Olney, who was a CBS newscaster, I think he now newscasts for NPR, Warren Olney was doing the interviews for the media. So we went up to the boardroom in the superintendent's office to meet Warren. Really interesting. I was asked many questions, and they were directed at me because I was the incoming president. I was asked many questions to which I gave studied and intelligent answers, I thought. But near the end of the interview, we were already on our feet. We were standing up, getting ready to go. This has been maybe some 3 to 4 hours. I was asked how I got selected to be president. And you never ask a Rotarian that unless you want a stupid answer. I gave the stupid answer. Because the standard response is, oh, I don't know, I must have missed a meeting. And I cannot believe to this day that I said that. I said, oh, I don't know, I must have missed the meeting. That was a careless and decidedly unstudied moment. Well, that evening, the story was on the top of the news. So those of you who were born then, the story was on the top of the news. And with 3 hours of copy, 3 or 4 hours of copy, guess what they played? My inane and embarrassing response, I don't know, I must have missed the meeting. But I started to learn then of the capriciousness of the media, and I knew that I was going to have to adopt a more serious mode. I had never had my face in front of a camera before, and so I probably didn't know how to behave. But I knew that I was going to have to represent Rotary with some dignity. And so we went back to the club. We had to move our meeting place because we didn't have enough room to accommodate all the people who wanted to come and visit this club. We had people from Germany, we had people from Italy, we had people who wanted to see this club that had changed Rotary. And I learned how to be circumscribed in any and all answers that I would give about this case. This was also, as I mentioned, my year as incoming president, so I had to settle into the goals we had set, which included, of course, Polio Plus, while the whole world was watching. And Polio Plus, my experience with polio also is part of my Rotary moment, and I'll tell you about that later. We had some interesting telephone calls, including one that asked if the food were any better. No, that there were women in Rotary. And I said, no, because we're not cooking it. Well, some were decidedly less pleasant. We didn't get a welcome back from Rotary International, but we did get a new due schedule, which meant we knew, they knew, we knew, we were there. And of course, in 1989, some 2, almost 3 years later, following an impassioned speech by Frank Devlin, the Council on Legislation voted to accept women in Rotary. But remember, this was 1987, and it was not until 2004, April 2004, that the Rotarian printed several articles about women in Rotary. And then I was the centerfold, fully dressed, but I was the centerfold. Rotary has removed, finally, the last vestiges of sexist language, so that now they profit most who serve the best. And even more new, a club may not be chartered now unless its membership is open. It doesn't have to be contained. The membership is open to both men and women. This didn't start as a women's issue, but as a simple attempt to recruit more members into Rotary. How successful has that been? We still have a long way to go. In the United States, maybe about 30% or a little less of the membership in Rotary is comprised of women. Around the world, it's in the 20s. But we've been in Rotary now for 33 years. And that was the beginning of my journey through the humanitarian organization that's Rotary. The realization of the opportunity to serve in an ever-shrinking world, the opportunity to meet men and women who can see and articulate a need and its solution, no matter how difficult the way or how meager the resource. Several people have said interesting and important things. Maggiagli, when he was president, our president Maggiagli said, women serve alongside men in every segment of life, in education, in medicine, in warehouses, and in construction. Why not in Rotary? I was in an incredibly fortunate place when this all happened because it has brought such bounty into my life. I've served my district in many positions, including district governor, and I've had the pleasure of talking to many clubs, including you, here and overseas, who are fascinated, still fascinated. I am fascinated by the fascination in this story. And I've made up in many clubs in other countries. I'm going to talk to the club in England next week and a club in Australia. My first makeup internationally was in the Rotary Club of Claremont in London, where Queen Elizabeth and I were toasted on the same glass of champagne. And so we've gone on to do lots of important things like sink water wells in Nigeria, establish an AIDS clinic in Jamaica, support an orphanage in Mexico. And my Rotary moment came during a NIDS campaign when we were in Delhi. We were with a group of social workers who had a list of all the babies in the community, and they were going out giving inoculations against polio. And we went to this one house where this woman came out with her baby. The baby was inoculated, and then she said, "You know, I think there's a lady upstairs who had a baby a few weeks ago. Can I go get her?" She wasn't on the list, and she ran upstairs and brought this little baby down, and they inoculated that baby, and my heart was just full when I watched what was doing. Nothing compares to that feeling that you may have saved the life of the child into whose mouth you have placed those inoculating drops and contributed to the eradication of a dread disease, only the second disease to be eradicated uh, since smallpox. But these are all done with the help of the Rotary Foundation, which provides the backbone of the work that we do in Rotary. And I give to the foundation because it maximizes money given by individuals and others and allows me to serve the creative efforts of all who serve, all who believe in service above self. I stretch what I can because that's what I need to do. A dime a day, 3/4 a week, that's what we all do. And so that's how we serve. When we succeed in eradicating polio with the help of Bill and Melinda Gates, who and UNICEF and CDC, all the companies that are working now on coronavirus, that will be the second disease. And I wonder how the coronavirus will be ridden as we do this. In India, also, I met Shimashri Sen, Jennifer mentioned her. And in India, I got involved in working with Deepa Willingham School in Piali. That's a school that accommodates 200 students, 200 girls, and kindergarten through seventh grade, preschool through seventh grade. And that school recently has really come under the ravages of Cyclone Amphan. Uh, the building itself is a sturdy building and it stands, but the buildings outside, like the gazebo and some open buildings that were made to accommodate assemblies, were pretty much destroyed. And the palm trees, all the leaves are hanging down, but the trees are still standing, so we know that they'll grow again. So that school really is in need of some help. You know, I carry out my grandmother's creed of service. She never heard of Rotary, but she believed in service. She'd get up early in the morning and go to the butcher shop and get meat for her neighbors, and she'd do all of these things. See, our goal, our value, our core value is service above self. And when I was a district governor, our goal was peace through service. But I think that until we meet the needs of people for food, clothing, shelter, clean water, and healthcare, and all the basics, there's no place in which they can receive and absorb and respect the concept of peace. I worked with that school because it's part of what we're doing for that. We are citizens of the world, where every action, however remote or seemingly far removed, has a ripple effect on us and on all others. Listen to the news from around the world. Listen to the news and look at the effect that it has on us. To the extent that they are well, we are well. And I think of Martin Luther King's reminder to us to ask ourselves each day what we have done to help someone. To whom much is given, much is expected. And that's what we do as Rotarians. When I joined Rotary, I didn't know anything about Rotary, you know? So the encouragement is for you all to wear your pins. Wear your pin every day. And I tell people, I used to fly a lot. And if you really want to get some attention, then you drop your pin on the floor. And when you try to pick it up, did you ever try to pick up anything from the floor in front of you on the airplane? That's a struggle. But while you're struggling, if you're sitting next to somebody who would be a good Rotarian, he says, "What is that?" what are you trying to get? And I say, oh, my Rotary pin. What is Rotary? Hey, there's your opportunity. And when you go home at night, take the Rotary pin off your suit and put it on your pajamas. And your spouse will say, why are you wearing the Rotary pin on your pajamas? And you explain the whole thing to him. And you know what? Next day, that Rotarian is in the office or on the coffee pot telling somebody about you wearing the pin on your pajamas, and they're saying, what's Rotary? Boom, another member. There you go. Spread the word.
Sylvia, thank you for being the original Rotary geek and for being the ultimate example and epitome of people of action. And Jennifer, you as well. We are grateful for you all spending some time with us today.